is the native soil of the farm. I mean, not the native soil, which was silt loam, forested duff soil, but
right. But what is left over after?
Yeah, but what is left over?
There's a European farming for.
So whereas the European can't necessarily cope with those conditions, the American elder, which was one of the only shrubs other than autumn olive that was persisting in any type of quantity on site when we first arrived here. So
and that's very I want to say wise, but I know there's a better word for this. That's very observative, right? To come into a land and say what's already here,
sure,
and how can we work with it, right? As opposed to what do I want to plant here, what thrives here already.
Yep. You should talk about that as a permaculture concept.
Yeah, well, there are 12 permaculture principles, one of them being observe and interact. So that holds to that theme, which is, when we come into a landscape, we don't necessarily want to project onto the landscape, but we want to see. We want to go through, prolonged observation and really try to tune into what's already happening in the landscape and make, minor adjustments, step back, gain the feedback from that, interact again. So it's this iterative process rather than kind of a blank slate or plow it, till it, reset it type of approach.
And for all my students out there, scientific method, observation, right? First, really look, sense, hear, smell, taste, touch when it's safe to do so. That's wonderful to see in all aspects of life, specifically, polyculture and forest gardens and food forests.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that is an opportunity to point out that your site-specific design is not necessarily a static panacea. It's that observe and interact relationship needs to be extended over the lifetime of the relationship with the particular ecosystem that you're playing a role in, as it may be. But to say, okay, well, I have my design here and I'm going to put it in, and then I, can just go hang out in the hammock.
Right. And let everything.
I think it's a little bit misleading in that the system that you're managing is constantly responding to the choices that you're making. And if they're deleterious choices, that'll be reflected in the system, and that doesn't mean that you fold up shop. That just means that you observe and formulate the appropriate response to address whatever has gone awry. Or on the other hand, it becomes a learning opportunity to say, well, my desire led me in this particular direction where I wanted to see this manifest in the garden, but it didn't. Instead, I've been presented with this alternate scenario. And then it's like, okay, well, can I assess this in a way that doesn't impose my own hierarchy on it? Can I recognize that even though I particularly dislike coming across a thistle plant, because it's very uncomfortable for me, I know when it's in bloom, it will be covered by throngs of butterflies and native bees, and it becomes a learning opportunity.
The way you talk just harkens me back to think for relationships with people, your career, your relationship with your family. I mean, your
relationship with yourself.
Your relationship with yourself. I might want to be this person at this particular time, making this amount of money and have this amount of kids and etc. But wait, let me observe and not have such a static, concrete. This is what must be, and then I'm successful. Rather, like Jim Carrey says, it's about letting the universe know what you want, working toward it, and letting go of how it comes to pass.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that is
absolutely.
That is deep, and I think that is both logical and spiritual, and I think that it is beautiful to see a group of people doing this to help feed people.
Yeah. I have a saying that I always say to my apprentices, and they never quite get it right, because it's very wordy and verbose.
Well, let's have it then. Perfect. We're in the right place.
Okay. Don't get didactic. Don't get dogmatic. It's a relationship, not a dictation.
Don't get didactic. Don't get dogmatic. It's a relationship, not a dictation.
Yes.
And if we
great.
uncouple that or take if we weave that apart, don't get
Yeah.
didactic. Don't command like a dictator, right? Don't get
right.
dogmatic. These are my beliefs, and therefore this is what has to happen.
Right, because really you'll just drive yourself into the ground that way.
Right,
because
right.
Nature will buck at every corner.
Right.
And then you'll be so part of it, in that process of observation is really attuning yourself to feedback in a way that moves beyond just saying, I recognize this, but moving toward it in a way that reorients your own posture to say, I understand this, and here's a way that I can positively interact with it.
Love it. Love it. I understand this, and here's a way I can positively interact with the thistle plant, which will have some benefits to be a pollinator, or attract pollinators rather, right? And therefore pollinate the other crops I have here,
Yep.
right?
Right.
Yeah, I think that is a life lesson for every. You could paste and copy and paste that onto everything, and then realize you're going to have to alter the text.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Love it. Love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Elderberries. So what exactly do they look like when they're ripe? And yeah.
Yeah, elderberry ends up being a cluster on an umbel.
A cluster on an umbel. The umbel being the specific form for this.
Flower, yeah.
The umbel's the flower.
Yeah, so this shape here
Yeah.
is known in plant botany as an umbel.
So the umbel has many offshoots.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's somewhat of a dendritic or a fractal pattern.
Dendritic or fractal pattern, similar to the dendrites in the brain, right?
Yep,
Right.
yep.
Yeah, love it.
Yep.
Okay.
And so that's immature berry right now. It has stark white flowers on it earlier in the season, and
Okay.
then these berries ripen to a purple that's even darker than this. It's almost a dark purple, almost on the verge of
That
black.
indicates the presence of the flavonoids.
The flavonoids, which are antioxidants, correct?
Yeah, they have an antioxidant effect, yeah.
And so when you hear chefs,
And an anti-inflammatory.
okay, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and I always think about chefs and cooking, and great chefs at Far Hills Country Day. Chef Howard, said, you want to have your white chef shirt or whatever they wear to be colored with all sorts of an array of colors, because the darker and the more colorful your plate often is a direct correlation, often with high flavonoid, high antioxidant,
Absolutely.
high health.
Yep.
So
Absolutely,
colorful
yeah.
plates.
Yep.
That's true. Although white vegetables, cabbages, is very healthy.
Okay, let's not forget the yes, those.
But I think that brings up a point, because the elderberry is one of those foods, whether you're using it for the flower or you're using it for the berry, which can sort of easily transition between the realm of food and medicine. And so a lot of the culinary traditions are seasonal with an elderberry. So maybe you're drinking an elderberry cordial over the winter when you need that extra immunological effect, or to tonify you during those months. And so in the context of this particular forest garden, we often refer to it as a medicinal forest garden, because a lot of our species tend in that realm, where they can transition between the space of, being food or being medicine. And as an herbalist, I'm creating medicine for my community out of what I'm growing in these fields, and Johan is harvesting berries and herbs that frequently will be sent out to restaurants to be used in a culinary capacity. So there's a flexibility in terms of the uses of a system like this.
Okay. And it makes me think automatically of, I think it was Hippocrates, but I'm sure there's many other well-known people, and it doesn't have to be well-known therefore to be edified or to be listened to, but that food equals medicine, right?
Eat thy medicine, I believe, is the
eat thy medicine,
yeah,
right?
is the
and particularly in not only the United States, but you look at countries like Qatar or countries like China, any sort of major industrialized country that has taken on that quote American fast food lifestyle, you see an increase in obesity, increase in hypertension, an increase in lack of health and dis-ease, not having ease. And I think that it's because we become so detached and far from our food system. Not that the advent of monoculture and pesticides and herbicides and all these machinations and this quicker, more massive way to do things is necessarily inherently bad, but that we've lost track of the importance of a higher nutritional value, being in touch with what we're doing, what we're eating. And just like fossil fuels. I don't think they're necessarily inherently evil. I think they're tapping into ancient sunlight. I always say it because it's true, but I think that we need to assess how what we're doing, whether or not it seems big, it seems great, is that really the best thing for us, right? If it's faster and it's tastier and it's more delicious, is that really the best thing for us? Maybe we need to retweak and neurally re-net what we think a good taste is, because we've been genetically, through hundreds of thousands of years, predisposed to love fats, salts, and sugars because it was so rare that we found them on that daily or monthly basis.
Yeah, and they're not inherently bad for you.
Right.
Either.
Right. It's all about balance.
So it's kind of the quality that you're getting. But yeah, I just wanted to say, I know you wanted to look at a larger tree, right? One of the larger persimmons, but there's an opportunity right behind us to look at kind of the next succession to come in. So, I mentioned that brambles and berry shrubs and things like that would be coming up after the herbaceous succession, or in the midst of a later herbaceous succession in a landscape that's transitioning to a forested ecosystem. But something like currants actually show up a little bit later in the system. They're not going to be at the forefront. At the forefront, you're going to find more of your thorny species, so blackberries and raspberries and multiflora rose, and a variety of these, kind of robust growers that come in that first succession. But then behind it, once the light dynamics start changing, you'll find gooseberries and currants coming into a higher concentration.
Gooseberries and currants.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Well, that means in the context of our particular design and our particular strategy for stewarding this succession on this landscape, because elderberry is always going to be our dominant species, we're going to have less canopy trees, because space will be open for the light, for ripening for the fruit. But then underneath the elderberries, there will be increasing cooler, less light intensive, more shadowy spaces, and that's where you'll see a plant like currant thriving.
Okay.
So that's why it's coming in at this later point where you've got this, you've got this shelter being formed by the succession of elderberry.
Right, you see it all around us here.
This area.
And so which particular plant is the currant? Is that this one right here? This one right here. Yeah. And it'll produce, we're thinking black currant? We're thinking, is that the right kind of currant I'm talking about, or no, completely off base?
There are black currants, but...
Yeah, there's American.
But this isn't it. Yeah.
This is European red currant.
European red currant. Okay.
We have American black currant planted, which is a native, really good for kind of wetter soils, thicket forming. European red currant is more appropriate for culinary application.
I can't help but look at how similar it looks to an oak tree leaf. There must be a similar class or
maple.
order, or maple, right? That is, look at that. There must be some more genetic, they must be related very closely.
Actually, interesting enough,
look at that.
The leaf
looks so much like a
itself
maple.
has a tradition of medicinal use.
Oh, look at that.
So, a berry is yielded.
There's the berry.
But currant leaves also have a value.
I can eat this, of course.
Yeah, before it got a kind of sweet tart taste to it.
Oh yeah, that's great. Wow,
Phenomenal.
That's quite delicious. Almost like a pomegranate.
Yep.
That's great. That's great. All right, so I'm listening. What else do we need to know about? So we started with the elderberries. They're creating the shade. Now we're going down to some species that are really love the shade. I'm listening.
Yeah, and then I guess on the flip side of that, Lynn mentioned canopy species. This is our Carpathian walnut. So this is like classic, walnut. Edible walnut that you'd find in the supermarket.
Really?
Yep. And that tree, eventually be taller, one of the taller trees in the field. But this foliage is fairly spread out, lets a good amount of dappled light come through because of the structure of the leaves.
Dappled light being light that's been dispersed previously?
Yep. as opposed to a dense shade of like a oak or a maple tree.
Okay.
Where that's kind of more of a shady environment underneath. You can still get kind of partial shade conditions through
Yeah.
incorporating walnuts, pecans, hickories, black locust, those kind of open leafy trees into the landscape.
And again, that's the optimal light conditions that we're going for.
Right.
Yeah, in the long term.
Yep.
Wonderful. And so I can't help but think. I mean, this what's the specific species of walnut? The Carpathian walnut here. I mean, it is what, 3-4 years old? Not even.
Yeah, not even probably.
And so it's going to grow to 15, 20 feet.
Higher than that, even 45, 50 on average.
Wow, and so this is going to be a forest.
Yeah.
This is going to be, you're going to be shaded, you're going to,
Yep.
and this is, we're talking 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, this will continue to grow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
It's not just for us.
You're going to have some lucky children running around these, you know, this is 10,000 times better than a trust fund, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, there's more value.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then with that, you know, the hope is that the system becomes self-replicating as well. So
Yeah.
those oaks, those maples, those walnuts are dropping seed. The pawpaws or persimmons are dropping seed. The currants and the elderberry, the herbs, and you know, so through time, the system starts to actually adapt and blend into the landscape and kind of blur that line between planted and cultivated.
That's
versus
wonderful. That's wonderful.
emerging.
It reminds me of the elephants eating particular species of fruits
Yep.
going throughout the forest, the Amazon and other areas.
Yep.
And they help weave and that beautiful fabric, that beautiful mosaic of life. And I wonder what kind of animals here are eating the seeds and then, you know, therefore also dispersing them in that nutrient-packed, you know.
Well, that's where a management technique comes in that's been our go-to approach for managing a system like this, which is managing the reproductive potential within the system. So what does that mean? It means that, you know, when thistle is going to seed or wild lettuce is going to seed, both valuable crops in their own right, though not something that we want proliferating in the garden, those plants will be chop and dropped, used as mulch around plants that are allowed to go into their full reproductive potential, which are the plants that we want to see replicate across the farm.
Okay.
So that it's a approach that involves encouragement and discouragement, and is actually, from what I understand, and I haven't read too much about this, I've mostly just heard talk of this.
Yeah.
But this was a very, this system of encouragement and discouragement mimics a much earlier system of land management that was employed, certainly in Europe, evidence of it